Today, we have Mark Pinsley. He serves as the elected controller for Lehigh County, Pennsylvania, an independent county-wide role responsible for safeguarding taxpayer dollars and ensuring financial accountability across county government. As a fiscal watchdog, his work centers on transparency, rigorous oversight, and protecting public trust in how public funds are managed. Bringing a deep background in business and technology, Mark oversees complex budgets and financial systems, translating audit findings into real-world accountability. His work spans issues like efficient use of county resources, jail cost reforms, and health system oversight. It's a great pleasure to have him on today. Sir, how are you?
Very good. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, we have some fun things to talk about. We had a great chat before this. I wish it was included in this, but we're gonna try to relive some of those moments.
I love it.
So tell me, what is top of mind for you as the controller? What's going on today in Lehigh County?
Today in Lehigh County, well, you may have heard that we evicted ICE out of our government buildings. That's probably what's the biggest issue going on today.
That is the news.
Turned out, it turned out that, and quite honestly, it was sort of an interesting thing. So they were in our buildings. I didn't know. And one of the reasons I didn't know was because normally contracts that are signed get put into our computer system. And in this particular case, it wasn't signed, so it never made it into our computer system, but we had already invited them into the building. So I didn't know that they were there. We had a new election, so we have a new executive, which is like the mayor, if you will, of our county. And the guy that was in charge of that contract retired, and so we had an empty space. And as controller, one of the things that I get is tips, like money that's being spent improperly, people stealing stuff, that kind of stuff. And so we got a tip and we looked into it, and lo and behold, ICE was there, and they hadn't paid their rent in over 3 years. And so we kicked them out. They've got 30 days or, whatever's left, 20 days left.
Right. So it wasn't necessarily because of just failure to pay because they didn't want to pay, but there was some we'll call it a lack of consistent negotiation based on lease contract differences and prioritization.
Yeah, exactly. The problem with working with two governments working together is one government wants to use their contract, the other government wants to use their contract. And there was just a lot of back and forth that had gone on. And then the person who owned the contract, it becomes less and less important after a while, especially after they've already moved in, right? And I think I just think it was a confluence of errors, and they hadn't paid. And, in today's environment with ICE being in our building, just not a good look for the county. And quite honestly, just to be upfront, I don't care. I just don't think that the county should have federal government officials in it ever, period. And part of that is because we can't look at our people, our residents as citizens. We have to look at them as residents. And so, for example, let's say that we have an immigrant and that he sees that you were robbed, beaten, whatever. I don't want that immigrant not to report it. I want them to be able to report it. And so they should be able to work with the county in whatever capacity and not worry about being deported. So that's just more of a county versus federal government issue, and maybe even state government issue, so that why we should at least look separate than everything else.
Right. I mean, it happens to be an interesting timing because, say, from a news perspective,
Yes. Yeah.
okay, we're evicting ICE from the building, does take a bit of a position on a very polarized matter. Excuse me. So is that your position? How do you feel about what's going on in Minneapolis, and what do you want to see for your own county here? And as a controller, put a kind of controller lens on it, because you may have your personal feelings and your political feelings, but you have to maintain that sort of balance and integrity as a controller, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So look, as a controller, it's been 3 years. They didn't pay. They need to go out. They need to get out. It's just that simple for me. And it's not like we were just a little bit, we were only inches away from getting a deal. There was no inches away. We were still, negotiating back and forth. Right. So it just wasn't going to come to be. And and so they need to leave, and they just need to leave. That's just the way it is. Then on a personal perspective, like the Alex Preddy shooting hadn't happened yet. The Nicole Good one had happened, and like you know, ICE in particular, is threatening. I mean, like when you look at it in the community, people are not saying, hey, well, I shouldn't say there aren't some. There are definitely some people that are very excited that ICE is there, but I would say the majority are not. And I would say law enforcement, for the most part, local law enforcement is not, because they work with the community. They have to work with the community. Like the example that I gave you, like I'm very familiar with a case where a woman was raped. She was an immigrant. She was raped by a white man, and she would not show up to testify against him because she was afraid of being deported. And so now, like, any white guy knows that they can go rape an immigrant. Like that's not good for anyone.
Well, you bring up a whole new category of protection that may, you know, because that's not specific to ICE necessarily, right? But it is specific to any immigrant who feels that they've were mistreated in any way, large or small, right? Wage theft, for example,
Yep.
right? Where if you commit wage theft against an immigrant, what are they going to do? It's hard for them to be
Yeah,
like,
they're gonna do
hey,
nothing.
what can you do? You hope that the employer is going to be fair with you. But if they're not, so where, this is a larger issue.
Yeah, there was a level of fear that existed before ICE, and that fear has now escalated to, a 12 when it was maybe a 4 before or a 5 before.
Okay,
And once
sure.
again, like the local police had developed relationships within these communities, right? So that people would feel safe reporting and saying things that were going on and not feel like they were going to be turned over to even ICE 5 years ago, right? Like they just didn't
Yeah.
have that fear. But now they do have that fear because ICE is just coming in, and ICE is, I mean, like we have ICE that comes into our courthouses, and waits for people to show up. I know of a case where the guy was on parole, but not parole, probation, and ICE called pretending to be his probation officer, and he came to report as he should, and then they picked him up. Now you could argue, well, he did something illegal, perhaps, but now like that situation will make it so that other people who would normally show up for probation are going to be are going to question whether to do that or not.
Well, I mean, as a controller, you, when you're looking at funds that are spent on, say, citizens versus
Yep.
immigrants, is there any way to differentiate that? And what do you feel is legitimate versus not legitimate? A lot of the polarized conversation that happens is around, say, healthcare, right?
Yep.
Why, right? Or any, or the millions of people that are trying to get in legitimately, that some people are just not trying to do that. That doesn't mean they're not good people. Doesn't mean they don't provide great value in all sorts of ways, right? But there's a lot of arguments to be made about fairness, I think, or at least that are being made. And as controller, when you see the money and the expenditures around different things, and whether the county is meant to protect its residents, but
Yep.
I suppose citizens primarily, but residents could be either. So how do you look at this?
I mean, I look at
Citizens
it.
versus not citizens, yeah, or
Yeah, so I
residents.
look at it
Yeah.
as residents. Like, I personally, um, the amount of money that we spend on non-citizens is minuscule, if you could even put a number to it. Because like, look, for every dollar that you spend in taxes in the county, 71%, 70 cents, 71 cents goes towards law and order. 71 cents. Right? So that's the public defender's office, that's the DA, that's the jail, that's the courts. 71 cents of every tax dollar is going towards law and order. The
In
majority of
Lehigh County
those,
specifically, you're saying when you collect some taxes
a dollar in
or
taxes.
fees, $1 fees or taxes, you're spending 70% of your costs.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, go to law and order. So that's a high percent. When you think about that, that's like a high percentage. It's not, and my guess is that's pretty close in at least any of the counties in Pennsylvania. I can't talk about outside Pennsylvania, but that would be, a pretty typical, cost that you would see. Of that 71 cents, not even a penny of it is going to be for non-citizens. It's going to be a very small amount, right? Like the majority of it is just, look, it's normal things. It's, drug usage, it's actual, physical harm crime. People are fighting. It is the public defender that has to support these. It's, evictions, right? Like those are sort of the normal things that are
Yeah.
happening in our community.
Well, what about
And then
crime? People in jails. What about the people in jails or that are taking up resources? Are you able to identify like people in court, people in jail? Are these, when you're saying that it's not for citizens, you're basing it on data points that you're getting from those departments,
Yes,
essentially,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I'm saying like the majority of them are citizens. The far majority of them are citizens.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm curious to
so
see what
they're
those data sets are. I guess that's why I'm asking that. Like, because
yeah, yeah.
when someone makes that claim, like, what are you using to make that assessment?
Well, we know who the citizens are and who the non-citizens are at this moment. I think our goal actually as a county is to not collect that information in the future,
Hmm.
right? Because this way we have nothing to give to ICE or whomever might want it.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And that's not me saying that, right? That's the county. That's the commissioners that are,
Sure.
are that are looking towards making that decision. I mean, look, we have ICE come we have ICE come into our courtrooms, not our courtrooms, but our courthouse, I should say. And like they go out the back door, they come in the back door. We have tunnels, they go through the tunnels. Like, and my feeling is like we don't have to have that happen. Like we don't have to let them have guns and like if you're a lawyer and you walk into our courthouse and you have a weapon, you have to turn it over before you walk into the courthouse. There's no reason to allow ICE agents to have weapons in our courthouses. Just no reason. Like if they want to go arrest somebody, go arrest somebody, but you don't need to have any additional weaponry. We only want our sheriffs to have weapons. So like
Oh,
I'm a
that's an
believer in that.
interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. That would be a, because law enforcement. I guess, does law enforcement tell other law enforcement to take their weapons off before they enter into a government a level of government different than the one that's entering? Right?
Yeah, you have the right to do
Yeah,
that for sure.
you do.
I mean, right now we don't, but we have the right to.
Oh, I said you could mandate that.
We could, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, right
Interesting.
now we don't. But like you could see a time where you would want to because of the escalations that we have seen elsewhere.
Yeah.
Whereas like, our sheriffs are primarily there to, protect the judges, quite honestly. Um, and they should maintain that. And
Yeah.
then if there's a kerfuffle, between an ICE agent and whatever, we don't want guns going off,
Of course.
in the courthouse.
Yeah. How do you separate the controller brain from the, which is such a critical spreadsheet, like,
Yeah,
how,
yeah,
right? You're dealing very objective at the
yeah,
controller level. And that is a credible role because it's your job to not be political and to do
yep,
things that are sort of by the book and to make sure that the math works, right? Um,
yes,
how do you separate the feelings that you have about whatever it may be? In this case, we're talking about ICE, um, especially because political labels, right, and your stances
yeah.
on things are the first things that people notice and want to hear about, right? So there's this like craving of that, but your goal is to be objective. How do you balance this?
I mean, so the way I try to look at it, quite honestly, is am I helping the people or am I helping the powerful? And so my goal is to always help the people. And I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican or independent or whatever, whatever shade you are these days. Like it just doesn't matter to me. What does matter to me is like, are we effectively using our money or ineffectively using our money? And like sometimes, obviously, I have opinions on that, right? So, for example, our DA, has a budget, for example, that's 3 times the public defender's budget, 300% more. And if you ask the DA, he would say, well, I need that because I have to get 12 people to say yes in order to convict someone, right? But the fact of the matter is, everything is negotiated. Very rarely does it get in front of a judge. So he has all the he, in our case, has all of the power, whereas the public defender has very little power. They don't have the ability to go do the research. They don't have the ability to have all the police work done. They don't have all that ability. And I've seen in, like, for example, in Tennessee, very red state, what they mandate is that the public defender has the 70% of the budget of the DA. And that works for us too, because 70% of the DA's client load are defended by the public defender. So, like, there's an example where I think, like, there should be more fairness. And I'm looking at a red state for fairness. Like, I'm not looking at a blue state, or, you know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
think that you can look at things and say, does this make sense? Does this seem fair?
Right.
And
So,
so I try to do that.
well, what do you identify on the political spectrum?
Yeah, so I'm definitely a Democrat, for sure. Some people would call me progressive. I don't love that title particularly. I don't hate it either. I really think of myself probably in many ways more as a populist. Like, I care about the people rather than the powerful. Like, and so, like, I don't think about it as left versus right, but I do think about it as up versus down. I think that like, in today's world, we just had those egg prices go up for a while there, right? Dramatically because of the bird flu. Do you remember that? It
Oh
was just
yeah.
like a few months ago.
I'm not sure because Costco always has their egg prices at about the same. So if you get your eggs from
Okay, yeah.
Costco, they're still like under $3 for 18 of them or something. You're like, free
That's
range? Sure.
Yeah, that's great. Well, up here, like, I mean, the egg prices went crazy, and it was all because of the bird flu. They destroyed all these birds. But then if you go and if you look at the financials of the large egg distributors, like, their profits went up 3 times, 300% more, like, during this time. Like, they're just taking
Yeah.
advantage of us.
Yeah.
And so, like, I view that as completely wrong.
Yeah. Disneyland pricing at every moment, you just baseball game. Sorry, I don't want to badmouth
No, no,
Disneyland,
I'm with you. Like, I'm with you.
but
Like, I just think that we're
I
we're
love
being ripped
Disneyland.
off. Yeah, I'm a Disney World guy, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right. But yeah, we'll call it baseball, sports game stadium pricing on every possible thing. And there is it also, by the way, common. This is not a new story. Oh, what do you know? The people are making more money in times of crisis. How many times do we have to hear that until
Yeah,
we get to the root of that? Because it's become trite, right? Right?
yeah, it
Trite?
has been. Yeah, no, and part of the problem, quite honestly, is that so we have antitrust laws, that we're supposed to keep these big companies from becoming so big, but we don't enforce them. Like, why does Amazon need to be a bookstore and a warehouse company and a data center and, name all of the things that they are today? Why do they need to be that big? Why did we let them we let that happen? We didn't have to let that happen as a society. You can argue that's good, you can argue that's bad, like, and I think that that's an independent decision. I think it's bad because there's not enough competition. Like, I do like competition. Like, the more competition there is, that's what drives pricing down.
Yeah.
Like, if you only have 2 or 3 players, if you have sort of this monopolistic, even if it's 3 players, they act like monopolies. That's not good for us. Like, it's good for them, not good for
Right.
us.
Well, it's good for competition as it relates to going into space, because
Yeah,
if you
space is
get
sort of
enough
an
money,
interesting.
you can start a space company.
Right, right, yeah, exactly. Space is kind of an interesting one because you can't make any money yet there, right? Like, you really do need true
Right.
R&D. Yeah, but
You need
but
a
for the
lot of
most
money to
part,
just do it.
yeah, yeah, well, yeah, exactly. They just and look, there's no money to be made unless you're working for the government. That's why Elon Musk's company is the only one that's really making money at the moment because he's got
Hmm.
all the contracts.
It's interesting. So why identify as a Democrat at all? Like, why not identify as independent, and not pick labels? What makes you want to choose that label over any other label? Because everyone's version of what it means to be a Democrat or Republican is their own way of thinking about it, and then they call
Yeah.
you something like that's what you are because that's how I think about it. The fidelity there's a mismatch probably, right, between what they're
Yep.
thinking and what you are. So, like,
I think the reason is you can't win an election being independent, at least not here. You have to choose a side. If you could win being like I happen to be a big believer in ranked choice voting because I think it does allow for the independents or Green
yeah,
Party or Libertarian Party to win.
great concept,
Uh,
great concept. Yeah,
yeah, I think so too. And like, so if that were to ever become sort of like the way, I might change to independent at some point. Like that would make sense.
yeah.
But today there's just no way to win. And by the way, the money, like in order to raise money, like to run a race, you have to be one side or the other. Nobody's raising money as an independent. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
unfortunately,
Yeah. Okay. So
you
the
know,
answer is easy. It's you just can't win an election. Yeah.
yeah, you can't win an election.
it's
Yeah, it's simple. Yeah.
it's yeah. Yeah. Not much more to it than that. But okay. So in in being a controller, you have the opportunity of overseeing lots of different systems, right?
Yeah.
All sorts of systems. What
Oh yeah.
makes and these systems guide how you make decisions. Uh,
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how you're making sure that the systems you're using are up to date or being modernized if they're not modernized, and
Yeah.
how you think that affects the quality of the data to make the decisions that you need to make.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a couple of components to that. So like when we talk about systems, systems can also just be process and procedures. Right? So, like, how do you collect your money? How do you write down the money? Where do you put the money? Like, just very sort of how many different people touch the money, right? Like, there doesn't necessarily have to be computer programs in that. It even could be paper. I'm not saying that it is, but like it could be. And so the first thing that we do is we look at those process and procedures and see like, does it make sense? And a lot of times there are simple procedures that you can change. Like, so, for example, you might have somebody that does accounts payable, meaning who you pay, and accounts receivable, meaning who you receive money from. If that's the same person, you're at risk. And so we would make a recommendation to separate that into two different people as an example. Like that's a very high level, example. But that is what we start going through, or is just like the process and procedures. We literally map them out. We use like Visio or whatever. We draw little boxes, right? And we show like how like the steps work getting, so you could literally see how something happens. And then based on that, we then make recommendations saying like, here are the areas where there's weaknesses. And it might be a computer program, that's being used, or how the data is being stored, or it might just be something very simple like that um, data is being entered twice by two different people where errors can form. So like we just look at like that's the kind of stuff we look at. We really look at the flow of things versus necessarily the computer program, although we make recommendations around that as well. Um,
What are the few pieces of software you use?
so we use Excel quite a bit, quite honestly. I use Python as well, like to do data manipulation. So if we have a lot of data, like I'll write some programs or someone will write some programs. We have another piece of software, which I can't think of the name off the top of my head. I want to say ACLU, and that's not it. It's like, but it's another program. It works with Excel, and it does a lot of data manipulation, but heavy data.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it's computer, like small programs that you're writing to sort of understand. And some of it's like very simple. Like so, for example, one of the things that we check for on a monthly basis is making sure that we didn't pay the same bill twice, right? Like we just run that through. We look for the like exact dollar amounts or whatever. Oh, we paid $120,527 twice. Right now, we need to go figure out, was that the same invoice? Why did that happen? And so some of it's still manual, but like it reduces the manual effort down to something like that. It's
Interesting.
it's fun, quite honestly.
Do you think there's room for modernization right now, though, in terms
Well,
of like, what would you dream? What would be your dream if for
so
Lehigh
first off,
County's? Yeah.
like we have an old system called Kia, which nobody has ever heard of. Nobody knows what it is. And so the good news about that is no one's ever heard of it. No one knows what it is, right? So there's no like, there's no malware, that's trying to take over this really old, database. But, I can't write, queries to it, so I would like to see something modernized, that has, like an Oracle database, or a SQL database so that we can actually, access data more easily. Right now, if we need to do that, we have to go through the IT department, and then we have to wait for them to be able to write some pretty basic queries.
Okay, that's a problem.
It is. It really is. Yeah.
So,
Because like, look,
yeah,
they've got better things to do too. Like if you have somebody who's skilled, you don't need the write access. You need the read, right? Like I just want
yeah,
to be able to understand what the data says.
yeah. Well, a lot of this comes out, it's interesting at at the controller level, you're and at the things that you're working on, transparency, efficiency, things that like the DOGE was coming out and
Supposedly for.
saying
Yeah.
supposedly for and working to achieve at the federal level.
Yeah.
How do you find the work that you do in relationship to what the DOGE said they were going to do, or you think they did or didn't do? But there is intent there. It feels like the mission of any good controller would be something similar to what the
Oh, yeah. I mean,
DOGE,
like,
right?
quite honestly, like I love the concept of DOGE. I think that the way they went about it was terrible. But so first off, I hire CPAs. I don't hire programmers, that are 18 or 19 years old. Like, so, start there. Then secondarily, like once we were like, if we were to, let's say that I did hire some programmers to do some of the work, right? Python stuff that I said that I was doing, like we wouldn't accidentally, fire the people that are like manning our nuclear weapons, right? Like that should never happen. So like what they were doing was like, they were writing some queries. They were looking for words, like that they didn't like, so it would be like transition, right? So like I saw, so because they for them transition meant from a man to a woman, for a woman to a man. But a lot of times the word transition, even in their stuff, meant from grade 1 to grade 2, grade 3 to grade 4. So they were
Hmm.
getting rid of people that were in education because they used the word transition somewhere along the line. And so like that's what I didn't like about DOGE is like it wasn't what it should have been, which is let's make the government work more efficiently. And I'm all for that. 100% behind that. And I think there are plenty of ways to do that. And
Yeah.
so it was just unfortunate to see like first off they politicized it way too much right from the beginning. Um where it really could have been a really good effort, quite honestly. I just think it could have been.
Did you appreciate any of the work that was done? And I say done is claimed to be. It's so hard to know how far they went with things and what actually
Yeah, I mean the
happened
numbers that I
sometimes on
have
certain
seen
issues. So yeah,
the numbers that I have seen, like I can't remember what the final number was. Like look, they were trying to save $2 trillion, right? And I don't think they saved a billion. I don't remember what the final number was. It was like tiny
yeah.
compared to like what they were trying to save. First off, there's just no way to save 2 trillion. Now, how did they get to the $2 trillion number? They got to the $2 trillion number because we spend $2 trillion more than we collect right now, right? Like that's where the 2 trillion came from.
Hmm.
Um, okay, great effort, right? But the question is like, should taxes go up or can you cut that much? And now what we've learned from DOGE is there isn't that much to cut, right? Like neither side truly wants to cut that deeply into what's going on. It used to be the Republicans were more about small government. I don't know that they're there anymore. Look, we just put ICE in and spent 2/3 of the cost of the Marines on ICE, right? They just bought a detention center here. I think it was for like 70 million dollars.
Yeah.
Like like there, I don't think on either side there's this true notion of trying to try and shrink government or save money. I just don't believe it's there. And so what should be there is if we're going, if we as a country agree that that's how much we need to spend, then we have to collect more revenue. And I think that revenue should come from the richest of us.
Yeah.
Like I don't think that Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates, are paying enough taxes. That's my perception.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, some of those are sort of classic Democrat points,
Yeah, no, I agree.
It would lean
like,
into that.
Just to be honest, I mean, that is truly how I feel. Like we as individuals, we cannot fathom, how much, $100 billion is or $400 billion is. Like,
Yeah.
there's just no way to fathom that. And there's no way that somebody needs that. Like in their lifetime, there's nothing that they need that for. And so like they can, and like, look, the easiest way to not pay taxes is don't take a salary, right? Pay yourself $1. So now you're actually entitled to Medicaid, right? You'd be entitled to Medicaid if you only made $1. And you're making like I think I saw that like Steve Bezos made $6 billion one year, like basically in interest, not exactly interest, but in interest, we'll call it $6 billion in interest. And so he doesn't have to pay a dime of taxes on that unless he liquidates it. There's no reason to liquidate it because he can just borrow against it. So he could
Right.
pay zero in taxes if he wanted to.
Right.
Yeah. That to me is just not right.
Yeah. Well, it's there are some philosophical arguments about it may not be right. Like some people, there's plenty to justify why people who earn tons of money can have tons of money. I guess what you're saying is there's a certain level, there's a threshold where it's too much and the government should then step in and say you have too much.
Yeah, I don't know if too much is the right word, but there's a point at which. So how much money do you think we have in the system right now? Like how much money do you think has printed money? And when I say printed, it could be digital today, but how much do you think there's nothing you could say that would be wrong, but if you had to guess.
Trillions.
Yeah, so it's $5 trillion.
Yeah.
That's the amount of money that we create. Now banks are allowed to create more money, right? By loaning money. So when you look at that, there's $22 trillion in our economy right now. 22 trillion. And they just gave, Elon Musk a bonus of up to $1 trillion. So 1/22nd of all of the money that exists in the United States. That is not necessary.
No, I think it's not necessary. I guess you could say someone with that amount of money would do extraordinary things with that amount of money. And, I don't know if he's, and that's not all liquid, right? That value is in the, it's, you can't just, he doesn't have, he can't buy a trillion avocados, right?
Right.
He can't,
I mean, what they do buy is what they do buy is they buy assets. That's what the problem is like, so if you look at the price of gold today, what is it? It's $5,000 or something like that, right? Because they're buying assets. Like money isn't really worth anything, literally, right? Like it's just a means of getting an asset. And an asset could be a home, it could be a car, it could be gold, it could be whatever. So they're competing with us on buying those things, including buying politicians. Like you and I could not go buy a politician, I can assure you. But Elon Musk can. Like, Bill Gates can.
Yeah.
Like, and so like they're buying our politicians, and I think that's a problem.
Yeah, well, and that gets into really money in politics in general. Citizens United, who I just had Tiffany Muller on recently, who's doing great work on trying to address that, and how money can play a role in politics. And I guess a lot of it comes down, one of the big issues is no matter what you do, the incentive structure still leans people into moving in a direction and spending the most time on the things that bring in the most money. Whether you're a business, you spend most of your time on the 20% of the clients bringing in 80% of the revenue, right?
100%. Yeah.
And if you're a politician and you're raising money, you're spending 80% of your time on the 20% of the people who, when they call you, you pick up for them. You don't pick up for the guy who gave you $10. You pick up the guy who gave you 10 million bucks.
Right.
How are you going to change that? And look, you've run for things. You know this game. How do you change the human nature of that problem? You could put money in all sorts of things. Okay, I won't give it to you cash. I'll give you it in this way that no one will detect, whatever.
Yeah. No, you can't
come stay in my mansion. Come stay in my mansion whenever you want and have access to my horses. I don't know.
Right. No, I don't think you can change human nature. I think that you can try and legislate out the ability to give money so easily. Like right now, like in Pennsylvania, for example, if you're a state senator or a House member, you can get an unlimited amount of money. Unlimited. Like, like if running for Congress, you have a $3,500, limit on individuals. Now, businesses are a whole nother thing. They could spend an unlimited amount of money. That's completely wrong, right? Like,
Yeah.
so we're allowing those that have the most to to buy us. And I think like you can't change the human nature, so you got to change the law to
Yeah, well, that
cover
most
that.
people agree. I think 70% of people, like you said, like agree on that is too much, right? But
Yep.
if I were, but the limit's what, 3,500? So someone who can afford to give up, someone running have enough money to just shell out $3,500 for a person running and hope they win. What if they don't win? And what if they do win? You don't know how they spend your money, right? Like,
Yeah, no,
so
absolutely. Yeah.
what's the difference? So let's just say now, let's shrink it down. Now, someone gives you 3,500 versus someone gives you $35. Who are you going to pick
Yeah.
up the phone for? So it doesn't matter how big the number gets. When it comes to prioritizing this problem, it just means that you get a disproportionate size of the money, and potentially the time on the phone and ear. And it's not lobbying, but it's sort of lobbying, right? The same with Tiffany
100%.
Miller, right? Where's that line exactly? One's before you get in, one's after you get in, but you can't really shave the line of where that work starts and stops, right?
No, but we have to come up. We have to do better than we are,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Well, you're a controller. What at the county level, what can we do? What can you and your team concoct to help at least when you're electing? I'm guessing you have county supervisors.
yep. So we can't do anything. Like we could make it visible. And what's visible right now is like it's unlimited amount of money. And so we could make that visible, and then the commissioners themselves would have like, and this will never happen, right? The commissioners themselves would have to limit the amount of money that they were allowed to receive. That's not. It's just like it's never going to happen. Like it has to come from the people. It really does. Like because if there's not pressure on the outside, the inside's not going to want to do that. It's just not. And that
They
I
will
think
not
that's unfortunate.
they will not take money away from themselves.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like at the end of the day, you want to win, right? Like that's what it comes down to.
Right. And
And,
that's
and,
sort of
and
why.
by the way, you play
Yeah,
the
sorry.
game you're in, right? Like somebody gives me $50,000, I'm taking it, right?
Yeah,
Like even though, like I might know better, um, but I know my competition's going to take the 50,000, so I'm playing the game I'm in. I'm not like if we're playing baseball, I'm playing baseball. I'm not playing football while you play baseball. Like
of course. Of course. Yeah, that's the way it
right?
goes. It's just the way it goes. I always wonder what is the acceptance that people will have towards that fundamental truth, which I think is a fundamental truth. You could say whatever you want about any of these, rulings, and I think that one's not one that I agree with, the Citizens United. But I think that was a bad thing in general, for most people,
I
right?
think
It
so too.
creates a large unfairness. So, but still, you could chop that off and you still have all these same issues. And I don't know. I think some of it's just an acceptance of like, well, that's just the way it is. Or is it? I don't know. I think there's probably a solution. There could be something that can
I mean, you can
fix
definitely
that.
start with transparency, right? Like these super PACs are allowed to be non-transparent as to where they're getting their money from, right? For long periods of time. So you could at least start by saying, if you're getting money, you have to truly disclose where it's coming from. So the super PAC can't just say, oh, we don't know where we got, $100 million from.
Yeah.
No, you got to disclose it. So like people will know, oh, hey, that's Coca-Cola or that's McDonald's or that's, whatever it is, like I don't know who's donating, but at least people would then be more aware, which I think is,
Yeah.
I really do think that awareness helps. It's not
Yeah.
perfect, but it helps.
Why don't, in terms of transparency at the county level, okay, so that's a good start, but what is the limitations that the county can do when it comes to its more localized enforcement of these rules? Where does that start and stop?
I mean, they could definitely, the commissioners themselves could say that there was an upper limit. And now, by the way, they would probably be challenged and taken to court. I don't know who would win. but they could start by saying there's an upper limit on the amount of money that could be taken for, let's say, a commissioner's race. But they can't go to anything else because, the state rules the state, government, the judiciary would be different. They
Yeah,
can only rule county elections.
got it. Um,
At least in Pennsylvania, by the way. Like different
yeah,
states could be a different.
they're called commissioners.
Yeah, for us, they're called commissioners. Yeah.
Interesting. They're called supervisors here. Um, that doesn't help with the common understanding of how civics works
Yeah.
either, because we have commissioners at local levels. So civics is such an understudied thing for most people to even understand why problems exist. Who do they blame? Trump, Gavin
Yep.
Newsom,
Yeah.
right? Whose
Yeah.
fault is
Yeah.
it? That's really
Yeah.
most of what they have. They don't know that there's even a county supervisor. It's like or a commissioner. They don't even know that that's a real role, right?
I definitely don't think, and quite honestly, I didn't learn civics like to this degree. To the degree I think that we should be teaching it. Like, right, you learned about the three branches of government, blah blah blah, and then that's about it. You don't learn, and you might learn like there's like state senators and there's U.S. senators. You have no idea what the difference is. You cannot understand like what each one does, and like there's just
Yeah,
not any education on it, which is a
yeah.
mistake, I think. You know?
Well, you're probably blaming the wrong people with a lot of passion. And part of what I do here is try to educate people and how things work, so that maybe they can not be so hateful if they are right now, because I think there's a lot of nuance to things, right? There's you can see things in a lot of ways, and it's hard to understand. No one's in the room where it happens. No
Right?
one.
Yeah.
So you don't know. We're all in a game of telephone, and then people hate people on a game of telephone. And so it's like, I'll ask you, where do you get your news from?
Oh, as many sources as possible. So I would say
Good
the
answer.
Washington Post, which I don't particularly care for, by the way, but I do read it. I do read Yahoo News to see what comes up there because like that's a good like smattering of everything.
Hmm.
There's this company now that I use. I can't think of the name of it now, but like it gives you like rankings and it shows you your blind spots. So it says, this is from the far right, this is from the far left, this is from the middle, and then it shows you like
Hmm.
things that you
All
might not
media? Is
see.
it called like all media? Is that what it's called? All media
It's not
bias?
all
They have like
media,
a
but it's
bias
something
chart?
very close
No,
to that.
something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I really like that. AP News is probably the place that I go for what I consider to be the most centrist news. Like their headlines aren't sensationalized, things like that. So that's what I like about them.
Yeah.
But I do look at Fox News, which I don't care for at all, but I look at it to see like what they're promoting.
Hmm.
Um, and we have a subscription to the New York Times, but I would say my son uses that more than I do.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I
and so you're a product of your background and experience and your
yeah,
opinions and the news that you consume.
100%. Yep. And I don't trust
Yeah.
any news at the moment.
Right. They're very hard to trust, especially when they're sensationalizing so many things. And you're like, usually is like, if I read a word that says like, okay, you just totally tried to get me, I don't even click. I'm like, next.
I'm with you. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That's why I like AP. Like I think they've done a pretty good job of not doing that. They're not great, but they're better than a lot. Like, when I see the
Yeah.
Washington Post or the New York Times, it's always like clickbait, just as you said. Like they're trying to say something.
It's, yeah. It's terrifying in a lot of ways. All right, before I got one more for us to cover. I think I'd like to talk about healthcare before we close out here, because it's important, and I know you care a lot about it, and you've
Yep.
discussed a lot about the pharmacy benefit managers, and the slice off the top that folks are saying, and you can't get the audit information that you're looking for,
Yep.
because of gag orders. Explain a little bit about that situation, where that cut is coming from, what is a gag order, and what you feel the county can do. What power does the county have to fix that in Lehigh County?
Yeah. So we've done. So like one of the things so I was doing research on the healthcare that we provide to our employees. And so there's really two sections of that. So one side is if you're an employee, you go to the pharmacist and you get whatever drugs you need. On the other side is, your hospital, your doctor, all of that kind of stuff. So I divided that into line because I thought, it's going to be easier to understand pharmacy. It's not that much easier to quite honestly, as you dig into it, there's so much. And I learned about what you mentioned, a pharmacy benefit manager, which is this middleman between us, Lehigh County, and the pharmacist. And so uh, Lehigh County is self-insured. And so what that means is if you walk into the pharmacist and you buy your $100 drug and you pay $10 for your copay, Lehigh County pays the remaining $90. The method that we use to pay that $90 is we take that $90, we give it to the pharmacy benefit manager, the PBM, and the PBM then gives it to the pharmacist, hopefully. And we pay the PBM, by the way. We pay them an administration fee for doing that. So the first thing I did when I started doing this was I said, okay, let me go to the PBM and ask them, Evan went to the pharmacist, he got his $100 drug, he paid his $10, we pay the $90 to you. Prove to me that that $90 went to the pharmacist. No, sir, we can't do that. There's some secret sauce in there. What kind of secret sauce would there be? So I then went to the pharmacist because I know what pharmacist you went to, right? I know what drug you bought, quite frankly. And so I went to the pharmacist and I'm like, look, I know that Evan came here. What did you get the $90 for him? I'm sorry, sir. We can't tell you because we have a gag order. We have a non-disclosure from the pharmacy benefit manager that doesn't allow us to tell you whether we got that money. So now what do I know? I know someone's skimming off the top, right? Because there's no reason for me, the person that's paying this bill, not to know. So then I did some more research. Like I started digging in some more, and like I have a list of all the drugs that we purchase. And are you familiar with GoodRx?
Sure.
Yeah. So GoodRx is this like site that you can go to if you don't have insurance, you can buy a drug at a lower price. So I took a list of all of our drugs and I ran it against GoodRx to see whether or not GoodRx would have a better price than what we were getting as a negotiated rate.
Wow. You must have used Python from that and connected to their API.
I did, exactly right. That's exactly right. And so I ran all that and I found hundreds of thousands of dollars we would have saved had we just used GoodRx instead of using our negotiated rate.
Yeah, wow.
Right.
Right.
And so like in the end, I end up finding nearly $3 million worth of grift, that this company was taking. And so we went back out to bid, and we got another company to come in. And this other company was called Capital RX, which I like highly recommend. They were, I mean, you should look at your own, obviously, but I think that what they did that I like as a controller is that I can now go to them anytime I want and say, show me that you paid this pharmacy, and they can show me the receipts.
Yeah.
Like there is nothing like there is no they're not taking anything off the top. Like I can see exactly what's happening and I can see exactly what I'm paying them and exactly what money they're making and exactly what the pharmacist is making, by the way. Like, so one of the problems that I had with our last one is that they were treating the mom and pop pharmacy worse than the CVS, worse than the Walgreens, worse than that. Right. And so mom and pop pharmacies in many cases were making less than what they paid for the drug from the PBM. So if they paid $1 for the drug, they might have been getting 95 cents or 90 cents. They were losing every time they paid. And in this case, they're not. We know that they're making at minimum $10 per fill. So they're at least making money because I don't want mom and pop businesses to go out of business. And we're still spending $3 million less.
Yeah. Wow. Well, so I mean, solid upgrades there.
Yep.
And do you appreciate any of the work that the current administration is doing to reduce costs, or at least what they're saying they want to do to reduce costs?
On the pharmacy side?
On the pharmacy benefit manager side?
Yeah, no, I'm 100% behind it. Like 100%. To be honest, during the last Trump administration, and I'm not a Trump fan at all, but to give credit where credit is due, like they did come out with some transparency laws that actually helped me on the other side, where I was looking at at the hospitals, that I wouldn't have had access to information had his administration not made some very good transparency laws. Well, one of their
Well,
mistakes, quite honestly, was that, and I don't blame them, by the way. Just it was, as they were trying to get better, they just didn't go quite far enough. Which is, so like right now, what ends up happening is if you're a hospital, the Trump administration created a law that said you have to present all of your pricing that you're getting. So that you're negotiating. So like if you've negotiated with Aetna, if you negotiate with Humana, if you negotiate with whatever, that information has to be available to everyone. So you can just go look at it electronically. But what happened was their fine was only $2 million if they didn't do that. So
oh
the
yeah.
hospitals are just paying the 2 million.
That's a classic issue in government of if the penalty isn't worth, the compliance, or the compliance is, or the non-compliance is worth the penalty. That's the,
Right, exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
And so
Wow.
while they did well, that was an error. I
Yeah,
think that they just didn't understand at that
yeah.
time.
Well, it's great that you can at least have the nuanced ability to, give credit where it's due. I always appreciate that on any side of where how people feel about one another, that they can do that, because I think that's where we can
Yeah.
stop
Look, they
hating
helped
each
me.
other less.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
yeah,
No, no, they did. They really, this was something really good. And I think it will change the industry
yeah.
over the long term. It takes time, but I think it's going to actually have a really positive impact.
Cool, cool. So lastly, look, something happened today, that is worth, I think, I want to say closing out on it, because I want to thank you for being here and taking your time to be here. I know you had a stressful day,
Yeah.
and, yeah, and you can explain a little bit about it, but, this is one of the sad realities, um, about being in an elected position, and some of the risks that people are taking now. And it makes, being an elected ever more honorable, because you do put yourself in that risk. But just explain a little bit about what happened today, and to the degree you're comfortable with, and
Yep.
yeah, and why you think it happened, and how we can maybe have less of this from a county
Yeah.
perspective, try to move towards, you know.
Yeah, some common ground, like, so I got a death threat today. It was a gentleman who left a voicemail. It was considered a credible threat. Um, and it was because of ICE. It was because of the work on ICE and kicking these guys out of the building. And so he was this particular person was very pro ICE and very anti immigrants. And at least on the phone call, he didn't make any discrimination between, documented, undocumented, legal, illegal. It was just immigrants in total. And I just think we should be able to disagree. And like, look, I've been in office now 7 years. This is my seventh year, and like I get hate mail, and I got hate calls, and I get love calls, and I get love mail, and I respect all of that. And quite honestly, I take every hate call that I get, or I will call them back and have the conversation, because I think like they're paying my salary and they're entitled to my time. We don't necessarily have to agree. Nobody should be getting these kind of threats. I don't care what level of government they're at. I think that we need to, that is something somehow we all need to agree to. Like, I'm not going to call, some Republican that I disagree with and be like, I'm going to come after you and your family and do this like that. No, like we have to win at the ballot box, whichever the side is. You don't like it, like that's your next role. Or even before that, why don't you seek to understand why the person did what they did? And then maybe seek to be understood. That's sort of Stephen Covey, if you remember him.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, one of my favorite
yeah.
one of
Seek
my
to
favorite
understand,
quotes.
then seek to first understand, and seek to be understood. Like I just think that we need to start doing that, and you see it in government. Even AOC and Marjorie Taylor Greene, both sort of lightning rods for death threats, and neither one should be put in that position ever. And
Yeah,
I feel terrible for the moment that we're in. It's become so heated, and I don't. I don't know how we turn the temperature down. Um, I really don't.
Well, um, I think it's a difficult situation. I think one thing that may be helpful for people is to think like, I know everyone thinks this is the worst time we've ever lived in.
Yeah.
I don't think that's true. I think it's the best time we've ever lived in. It may be a difficult
Mm.
time for our democracy and like things, the way people feel, but
Yeah.
still under how everything is in terms of quality of life, the people in the lowest income in America live better than 95% of the rest of the world. And, we're every country has practically doubled their life expectancy, and women pretty much everywhere go to school, except in a couple, like that doesn't exist except in a few annoying places.
Yeah.
And the level of education people get, how the type of resources they have access to, there's a great book by Hans Rosling called Factfulness, which really kind of makes you see how good we have. And it doesn't mean there's not a long way to go.
Yep.
But I suspect around the Civil War was a lot worse. Um, and people didn't have hot water.
Yeah. No, no, you're absolutely right. Like,
Yeah,
I've been fortunate enough that I've had a chance to travel the world and see like how other people live. And we could be very grateful, to be honest, that, that we live here. At least I am. Um, and that gratefulness makes me want to fight for the democracy, the type of democracy that I believe we deserve. And I think right now it's very difficult because people hate each other for no reason. Like, and that's when I think about the hard times that we're having, that's the hard time. Like,
yeah,
it's it is like the old brother versus brother, like there's no reason to be there. There just is no
yeah.
reason to be there.
Well, I think you summed it up pretty good there. You said the magic word there is gratitude.
Yeah.
And sometimes that bit of gratitude, you can share that with other people who have gratitude, and maybe start a conversation with gratitude instead of why you think one way on ice and someone else thinks differently on ice.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I
it's a
agree.
so let's end on gratitude. I'm grateful to have you on today. Thank
Yeah, I'm
you.
grateful to be here. Thank you. I appreciate it. It's very
Yeah,
exciting.
really good insights. Stick around for a second while this video uploads to the cloud.
I sure will.
All right. Thanks again.
Thank you.